we have to get beyond borders. We have to get beyond culture. We have to get beyond differences in language. We have to seek to understand the essence of what's there. And when we do that earnestly, with an open mind and an open heart, we recognize that yoga is a gift for all of humanity. The fact that it originated in a particular location at a particular time, which had particular languages associated with it, it makes no difference at all. Let's move right along here. Okay, Chris, it is.
So great to see you. Thank you all for being here. It's really, what an honor and a delight. I had a really hard time coming up with a question. I don't know if you saw all the endless emails. You know, this presupposes freedom from addiction, which I believe. But if freedom from addiction is possible and yoga is the medicine, how then do we make this medicine more accessible? And particularly given so many preconceived notions around yoga. So, you know, this has been something really bubbling around. You know, I've been practicing yoga and mindfulness meditation for 30 years, teaching for almost 25. Alone, those practices did not save me from addiction, right? It took the 12-step process, as you've so beautifully described, to make that connection, to connect those dots, to break through the block to spirit. And yet, again, as you said, the 12 steps do not offer us any instruction about the body or how to work with the mind, temporality. And yet, you know, I spend a lot of my recovery time with people from the 12-step world, and there is so much block to yoga. And, you know, now as a trauma therapist, the language is so tricky. And yoga, so many of these practices in sadhana are exactly the practices that heal somatically. So it's no joke that, you know, 2,470 days into sadhana, I feel amazing pretty much every day. Thank you very much, Tommy Rosen. But the accessibility, right? So, you know, obviously one light at a time. But I guess it's, you know, it's somewhat painful to see so much suffering and so much blockage.
Yep. Okay. Well, what an incredible inquiry. So much to dig into here. I want to start by saying that everything that truly, truly transforms a person's life, I mean truly, not just a little, but something that brings real transformation into a person's life, is controversial. All of it. If you think about that statement for a moment, I mean, no matter what is going to bring a person to a greater sense of awareness, naturally you're talking about a process that is not going to just include physical. It's not going to just include mental. You're going to come face to face with that challenging thing that creates a problem for almost everybody, and that's called the spirit, or the spiritual aspect of being a human being. So because we're in a transformational conversation, we're in the business of transformation, right? Addiction to recovery, that's a transformation. Disunion into union, that's a transformation. Disconnection into integration, that's a transformation. Life to death, death to life, these are transformational, transitional aspects of life. Whenever we're in any conversation like this where we're talking about human beings transforming and becoming awake, what that really means is you're going to come face to face with concepts like God, concepts like spirit and spirituality. And so there's going to be a hurdle to entry there. So the first thing we want to understand about yoga is its definition. So I'm going to hit this again and again and again and again. The word yoga simply means union. The state of yoga is that place where everything is connected. It doesn't mean that there's a place where everything's disconnected. It means that when you're in the state of yoga, you're in the awareness of what is actually true, which is that everything is connected. To not be in the state of yoga simply means you're in a state of ignorance or confusion or misperception. So, from a definition standpoint, if you said to somebody, would you like to be in awareness of what's actually true? Or would you prefer to live in a world of ignorance and confusion? And of course, anybody would say, well, I'd like to live in a truthful place. I'd like to be aware of what's actually real. Well, then, by definition, you're interested in yoga. You're interested in the state of yoga. You would like to achieve that state. How do we achieve that state? We achieve the state of yoga through the practice of yoga. What does yoga mean? Well, all yoga means, I'm going to break it down for anyone who thought it was, a bunch of postures and stuff. No. Yoga just means calming your mind. That's all. So you could say to somebody, would you be interested in having a calm mind or a scattered, confused, frightened, fearful, anxious, stressed out mind? I'll take door number one. I'd like to be in a state of calmness over those painful states. Of course. Oh, then you're interested in yoga. Once again, as with all things, we're going to get into a problem with definitions, with language, meanings. We're going to get into things like culture, religion, spirituality, and all of these opinions and ideas that we all have, preconceived notions, which keep us contemptuous, meaning we are against something. And we may even be contemptuous, as we say in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, contemptuous prior to investigation, meaning we're just going to say no before we explore what might actually be there for us. So, yoga originates, the practice and the principles of yoga originates in what's now known as India. India is the birthplace of yoga. This presents a problem for people in the West who say, what does that have to do with me? It's so far away from me. There's a different language there. They've got these strange notions about gods and goddesses and whatever that is. And in all of these ideas are misunderstanding. We have to get beyond borders. We have to get beyond culture. We have to get beyond differences in language. We have to seek to understand the essence of what's there. And when we do that earnestly, with an open mind and an open heart, we recognize that yoga is a gift for all of humanity. The fact that it originated in a particular location at a particular time, which had particular languages associated with it, it makes no difference at all. It isn't for someone over there and not for someone over here. It's universal. But this brings up challenges. Let's approach one of these challenges, which comes up all the time, which is for the devout Christian person. So many Christians have come to me and said, gosh, do you have anything for someone like me? And I say, well, who are you exactly? When you say someone like me, what exactly do you mean? Well, I'm a Christian. I'm a devout Christian. And then I'll usually say, that's incredible. What an amazing path you have found. And how wonderful is it that you have this amazing set of teachings laid down by the master, one of the masters known as Jesus Christ. How incredible that you can access that body of teachings, and that's a part of what you do. And then I say, yoga will make you an even better Christian. And that's really confusing, because someone says, well, it's in a different language. And then I have to say something like, well, I need to let you in on the fact that Jesus didn't speak English either. In fact, he spoke a language so ancient, it's not even spoken on the planet anymore. And that's an interesting thought to sort of bounce around like, oh. And I remind them that the teachings that you love so much, these beautiful teachings that Jesus laid out, were spoken in a language where the words actually had different meanings than they have today. And to really understand these teachings, we have to unpack the meanings of these teachings. And so now we get into a conversation, a philosophical, theological conversation about Christianity and the original meaning of the teachings of Jesus. The point is that a person starts to think, perhaps, interesting, I'm into these teachings and I'm into this religion and I love it. And I'm feeling like I can't adopt any other teachings because that might in some way get in the way of the purity of my devotion to Jesus or to Christianity, however that person sees it. And nothing could be further from the truth. I believe that Christianity or Judaism or Islam or Sikhism or Hinduism or Buddhism or the various paths of yoga or the 12 steps and other paths that lead to the truth, I believe they're all legitimate paths. And I believe that a person finds a beautiful path for them. And the gorgeous thing about that is they're now on a path that can lead them to the truth. I know Christian people who have found the truth. I know Jewish people who have found the truth. I know yogis who have found the truth. I know Muslims who have found the truth. I know Sikhs who have found the truth. I know Hindus who have found the truth. I know 12-step people who have found the truth. And that was a beautiful thing for them. To engage in a practice like yoga, the physical practice of yoga, or the chanting practice of yoga and using these words in a different language, this is not a declaration of a commitment or devotion to another God than the one that you have as your understanding. These are just simply technologies, these chants and these mantras or these postures or the breath work that we do. All of this is just a technology that will aid you in your movement towards the truth, which will help you to become more empowered in the body, more calm in the mind, clearer thinking. So if you're studying the scriptures, whether that's Jesus or any other scripture, you want to be able to approach the scriptures with the clearest mind possible. And the practice of yoga, the physical practice, the mantric practices, these are not getting in the way of any other body of teachings. They're only going to support teachings that lead to the truth. Now, we get into controversial territory when we start talking about some people's belief that their way is the way and the only way, and it's the way and the only way for everybody. And taking that one step further, if everybody else doesn't wake up to the fact that there's only one way and this is their way, everyone else is going to end up in hell. Not for a weekend, but for an eternity. Now we get into some trouble here. This is going to bring up a lot of questions for a lot of people. And if you happen to be one of those people that believes your way is the only way, then you're naturally going to come into conflict with a lot of other people. And so what seems to make sense to me at this level of my development, and I humbly say that the truth is the truth is the truth. Whether it was found through this path or that path or any other path, the truth is just the truth. And it can be touched upon through infinite roads. So many paths, one destination. Many paths to the one truth. Some people could say there's many paths to the one God. People would say there's infinite paths to the one God or the one Spirit or to connect with higher power. One of the most beautiful things about 12-step programs was the idea that you could choose the concept of a higher power that made sense to you. And this really brought such genius to that approach, is because the only religion, at the end of the day, the only religion really is personal. The only spirituality is a personal spirituality between you and your own sense of God, your relationship with God. Now, you could share that in congregation with others, but I have a relationship with God and I can't give it to you. You have a relationship with God's Spirit. You can't give it to me. But we can share in the love and the joy of that connection and that relationship. And we can say, isn't it amazing that we can even follow certain practices and certain principles, and we can look at certain truths, and that can lead us down a path. So we're hitting on the challenges that we have in helping people to adopt things that are leading them to the truth, which will help them to recover from addiction in a more complete and comprehensive and powerful way. We're talking about how can people embrace the path of yoga? How can they come to understand that yoga strengthens the body, creates vitality, boosts immunity, helps you to calm the mind, to deal with the mental health crisis that so many individuals are facing, and of course our society as a whole. When I talk to people about recovery, I tell them, if they want to work with me, you're going to become a yogi. Don't be scared. If you work the 12 steps, it's a path of yoga. You can't help it. You're moving from the dark to the light. That's yoga. You're going to calm your mind. That's yoga. Now, let's add in the other aspects that are going to help you to comprehensively deal with the challenges of your life as they come up. So what I'm trying to do right now is to inspire you, the listener, that true yoga is not a religious process. It only will bring you face to face with what's true for you. It's going to also bring these beautiful practices that strengthen the body, calm the mind, and make a deeper connection with you and the greater power and the greater spirit around you. Many, many Christians have practiced yoga. There's a lot of evidence that Jesus practiced yoga too and meditated deeply. And all the masters throughout the centuries and the millennia, they had some direct connection, some way of accessing a power greater than themselves and becoming realized beings. And that's what the path of yoga is all about. I would say that's what the path of recovery is all about. To be a person in recovery from addiction, to have recovered from drug addiction, to have recovered from alcoholism, but to still be suffering in your life is something that's so incredibly painful to experience. I know it firsthand. And when I see people in the world of the 12 steps who have overcome their core addictions, but are still suffering behind codependency, behind relationship issues, behind sex issues, behind money issues, behind personal power issues, spiritual dilemma, existential dilemma. When I see people suffering in this way, I say to them, don't stop. Keep going. adopt the practices and principles of the comprehensive path of yoga into your life, and you will be able to set yourself free. We trained ourselves into addiction. We trained ourselves into these addictive patterns of thought and behavior. And we can train ourselves out. But to do that requires some very specific technologies, some very specific practices, very specific principles, and it's called yoga. And I know it's so counterintuitive and it's so strange. People are like, are you telling me that for a person to recover from addiction, to really recover and find freedom in this life requires the path of yoga? Absolutely yes. By definition. Of course it does. But unfortunately in the West, most people think like, or they have this association with yoga that it's like getting onto the mat, or even worse, it's like, okay, I'll go to Lululemon, I'll buy a pair of $150 yoga pants, and then I'll get on the mat and that's my yoga. Well, that might be the beginning for someone, where they start a physical practice and start to come in connection with their body, their breath, their heart, their mind. And that's a beautiful, auspicious place. The deeper understanding of yoga is that yoga leads to freedom. It leads to the calming of the mind. It leads to the opening of an expansion of consciousness. It leads to the refinement of a person's intellect, and it leads to fulfillment in this life. And there's nobody alive today that doesn't want those things. And so if we can really be open-minded and look at yoga in this more broad perspective, then we can bring yogic practices and principles into our recovery work in the ways that's appropriate for each individual over time, and we can be even more empowered. We will see relapse rates go down. We will see our serenity go up. Our healing will happen more quickly, more comprehensively, and we will finally have a comprehensive approach to addiction that really works. Not just for the core addictions of drugs and alcohol, but for all the underlying causes and conditions. That is the meaning and the purpose of yoga, is to bring ourselves to that place of absolute healing. And so yes, if you really want to set yourself free, this is going to be something that you're going to want to learn and bring into your life in the ways that's appropriate for you. My approach to yoga can be different than your approach to yoga. But beyond all of this, there's a truth. If you find your truth as a Christian or a Jew or a Muslim or a Hindu or a Buddhist or anything, if you find the truth, the way that you got there won't matter. It won't matter. You'll be at that place of truth. And the truth was there before religion, before yoga, before anything. The truth just was. And so we're on a path of discovery. And we're using techniques and we're using technologies, philosophies, principles, and practices that help move a person along their path. Each of us will be different. Each of us needs space to find our own way. In every case, though, we benefit from a teacher, teachings, and a community. And if we have those things, then we're going to be able to get to that truth. And all I'm saying is the 12 steps worked for me, and yoga filled in all the gaps, and it all came together into one thing. That beautiful expression and that beautiful experience of yoga, or the truth. So I'm so grateful for this unbelievable inquiry, Chris. There's so much more to say, but let me just check in with you. What's coming up for you?
Well, I have lots of juicy quotes, Tommy, and lots of good questions. And, I was just thinking about what came to mind was Ram Dass, right? There are many pathways to God. And, I guess I'm just really grateful to have had at least the foundation. I couldn't connect the dots, you know. I always ignored the eighth limb. No, there was just a big no. And
Talk a little bit about the eighth limb so people know what
well,
you're speaking about.
connection to God, surrender to God, union with God, God, that energy, that, and yeah, and we agnostics, the 12 steps do give us those options. You know, I think it's just 2 paragraphs, but still, we are given these options: creative consciousness, creative intelligence of the universe, which is the language of Kundalini, right? Amazing. But I was really blocked from any of that. And the 12 steps connected it. I struggle sometimes with the language. So this conversation today has been really great because I too bristle at defects. But there is I was remembering, to defect is to leave one country for another. So I'm keeping that in mind around defects. But language is so powerful, and I'm really grateful that you just, we boil it down. Yoga's union. It's that state of connection, and yeah, I'm really grateful.
Thank you. I just want to say, with regards to the movement of the body, the use of breath, at the very least, to center oneself, to change one's emotional state, to bring oneself into balance. There are not too many people in the world that could have a real philosophical problem with that. Once again, the problem comes in when we start bringing foreign words in, or chanting, or we recognize the energy of a particular aspect of God, as they do in Hinduism so much, with different portrayals of God. You know, I've got this character back right here behind me, and that's a Buddha. And so that might be offensive to some people. And I would just say, from my perspective, right? From my perspective, this is just a representation of the potential of a human being to overcome the challenges of the mind and to find peace and freedom. I keep this here, right over my shoulder, very much on purpose, because it's a reminder of that potential. It's a reminder of what we're doing. So people who follow a particular spiritual or religious path, I'm all in support of it. And if you have a relationship with a power greater than yourself, it simply means that you have found a way to tap into greater power. And lastly, the most simple thing I can say, you brought up the word agnostic, a person who is neither convinced of the existence or the lack of existence of God. We're together in the circle today. So here I am with you, for example, Chris. You and I are working on a problem. And let's say the problem we're working on is addiction. Not your addiction or my addiction, but just we're working on the problem of addiction in general. Okay. You and me working together on that problem, we are more powerful than either one of us working on that problem alone. And so we have tapped into a power greater than ourselves. It doesn't have to take a shape. It doesn't have to take a form. It doesn't have to have a congregation around it. It doesn't have to have a church or a synagogue or a mosque around it. We have somehow tapped into something, some energy that is greater than either you or me. And I'm interested in that. I'm empowered by that. And to me, that energy runs through all things. And I believe that as we move down this path of recovery from addiction, we start to move the things out that block us from this greater power. And we start to recognize and realize the connectedness to that power, which is connected to everything. And we start to enter the state of yoga or union. So there it is again. It turns out language is a real blessing and it's a real challenge in our day and age as we try to present ideas and practices and principles that could be helpful to people, particularly on this death-defying path of recovery from addiction. So thank you and bless you so much for this inquiry, Chris. And
Thanks, Tom.
thank you and much love. And I look forward to connecting again around this as we go.